Before the luncheon adjournment, Deputy Lewis, Minister, you indicated that you would not be any longer proceeding with paragraph 3 of your amendment. As the debate has been opened, obviously you need the leave of the Assembly to withdraw paragraph 3 at the present time. Do you seek that leave?
Yes, I do, sir. I'd be grateful for member support on that.
Does any member, before I formally deal with it in terms of a vote, could I just have an indication on a standing vote? So would anyone please, you wish to speak to on that particular matter, Deputy Gardner? Yes, please do.
Yes, briefly, sir, please.
Well, if you'd like to speak to it now.
Thank you, sir. I just would like to thank for the Minister for consideration and withdrawing part C of his amendment, which will allow to the Assembly to consider my amendment on similar matters. So we will have my amendment, which will be replacing part C of the Minister's amendment. Thank you.
That's entirely correct. If members will agree that the Minister can withdraw part 3 of his amendment, that's still to be determined, then the consequence of that will be the Minister will not move part 3, merely parts 1 and part 2, and after that then the Assembly will consider whether or not Deputy Gardner's amendment might be adopted. So I think probably as people are indicating a desire to speak, I probably should do this rather more formally. Minister, you propose to withdraw. Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
And Deputy Ward, you wish to speak?
So is this just on the withdrawal of this amendment?
Yes.
Yes, then in that case, say yes, because I'd like to speak on the amendment. I just think we'd like to know what the process has been to come to this withdrawal, because we came here this morning, there was real uncertainty, and I'm just quite disappointed that we've spent so much time talking about a particular amendment, trying to work out the implications, and then all of a sudden this has been withdrawn. And I think within the Assembly itself, given that this is a government minister bringing an amendment, I just would like to know the process that has led to this being withdrawn. This is a confusing enough piece of legislation, an amended piece of legislation. And I will say, I mean, I was this morning within a hair's breadth of asking for a reference back on the whole thing so that we could sort out what on earth is going on, and that's still in my mind, sir. And I think an explanation is required by the Assembly. I don't want to sound negative about it. If there is a positive way of asking for that, then can you consider that this is it? Thank you, sir.
Yes. Does any other member wish to speak on the Minister's proposition for the Assembly to withdraw part 3 of his amendment?
Sir.
Chief Minister.
All it was to, I'm sure the Minister is perfectly capable of launching on his behalf, by himself, but I thought if it helps, essentially, sir, fairly late in the day, there was an inconsistency, given the willingness of the Conotub to accept both amendments. It was identified at very short notice that there was inconsistency between part C of the Minister's amendment and part C of Deputy Gardner's amendment. That's where the confusion, as we know, arose earlier today. It has all happened in the last, I'll say, few hours, relatively, and that's why anyway, there's been some discussions and some exchanges of emails, and the Minister was very pleased to support the Conotub's proposition, as you know, hopefully as amended, and that's where we've ended up. But it was essentially the inconsistency that was identified at relatively last minute between the two part Cs of both the Minister and Deputy Gardner, which, if that helps.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak on this procedural proposition? No other member wishes to speak. Then I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. And I thank the Chief Minister for his intervention there, sir. So I've always said, sir, that when it was proposed to change the use of the street permanently, I would always instigate a full and fair consultation process that seeks to balance the views and needs of all stakeholders. The Constable's proposition provides for this. The proposition is also entirely in line with the ethos of the St Helier movement and public realm strategy, which forms part of the suite of documents published as part of the evidence base of the Island Bridging Plan. Because of this, the department is already making the preparations necessary to commence this stream of work as part of the public realm strategy, which will seek to celebrate the local history and character to develop designs that encourage active use of public spaces to support both healthy lifestyles and the local economy. The retailers tend to overestimate how many of their customers travel by car. It's footfall, not car traffic. That is important.
Minister, I apologise for interrupting you. At the moment, we're only speaking as to whether you have leave to withdraw paragraph 3 of your amendment. Well, this is not.
Sir, getting carried away there.
Yes, this isn't a response to the amendment in general.
Yeah, beg your pardon, sir. Yes.
This isn't your summing up on the amendment in general. It's just your summing up on your request to the Assembly to withdraw paragraph 3.
Absolutely. I thank members for their support, sir. And as the Chief Minister stated, this was brought to my attention at very much the last minute, but happy to withdraw this with the support of members if it eases things along, sir. Thank you.
Much, Mr. Wall. I think we should put a vote in the chat on this one, and therefore ask the greffier to put a vote into the link. And I open the voting and ask members to vote. The vote is on whether the Assembly agrees that the Minister may withdraw paragraph 3 of his amendment as he has requested to do. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted. 36 votes for, 1 vote contra, no abstention, and 3 votes, that's in the link, and 3 votes additionally noted for in the chat. Therefore, we now continue with the debate on the Minister's amendments, restricted now to paragraphs 1 and 2 of the amendment. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I speak on. It's very difficult to speak on this amendment, actually, because it's very difficult to know what on earth it's actually going to do. And I'd like to pick out. I'd like to raise some questions for the Minister, really, in response. Part A, we're now looking at, is to maintain traffic restrictions to support the principles of pedestrian priority and through access by bicycle. I would like to know how specifically it supports those principles and what are these principles, because there are many principles that exist. I'm a cyclist and I'm principled, so am I a principled cyclist that is included within that? You know, these are just words, and what we seem to have here is a sort of exercise in semantics, an exercise in just bringing forward empty words. And I'm afraid, sir, this has been if there has been a feature of our sustainable transport policy, it has been empty words. Words, many, many words. Good job we didn't print it, because there would have been many, many trees. But I've talked about making change and absolutely nothing has happened. And to go further, sir, it says to work with. It says pedestrian support commercial centre of town through the creation of a sustainable transport corridor. So it's a new term, a sustainable transport corridor, and it sounds very bold, but we're talking about one road. It's more a sustainable transport cul-de-sac that we're creating. And I don't know how this fits into the wider St Helier situation. And I have a huge concern, which I'll come back to, in terms of what was said by the Constable of St Helier as well, when he pointed out quite rightly that we've declared a climate change emergency, both as an assembly and, very importantly, as a parish, which we are now meant to be addressing. And when he did that, I wrote down climate change. I like to make notes as I go along. I've been brought up well to do that. And I actually wrote climate change and then really next to it, because we keep picking out this phrase, this semantic addressing of climate change. But yet again, we're not doing anything that is actually going to make an overall sustainable impact. Now, I looked at this proposition and I have a policy of never abstaining. I believe that I am voted to vote yes or no for my constituents. But I've never been closer to abstaining from something because I don't actually know what it's going to do. The Part C has now been withdrawn, which is wonderful because I wasn't entirely sure what it was anyway. And my issue is not about improving sustainable transport, but every single path along the way has been objected to. We talk about a bus service. So this bus that is talking about, this hopper bus, doesn't exist. The electric buses, they don't exist. And it's not often I agree with things that Deputy Martin said, but she did make me chuckle when she talked about flying cars, and she's absolutely right. We might as well be talking about those. You know, what's next? Perhaps flying carpets. They'll be invented at some time. Perhaps we need to get a consultancy with Elon Musk or something and get some ideas from him, because we are living in cloud cuckoo land when we come to the sustainable transport policy. But there is a really serious effect, a serious side effect, sir, that could be important here. And that is what we've got here is a greenwash, a classic greenwash. By closing off Broad Street, we are going to create a sustainable transport corridor. Yes, along Broad Street. Nowhere else in St Helier. We're still going to have the problem of the Ring Road, which is not only pouring cars into town all the time. And I invite all of the ministers to come and walk along Springfield by Springfield Stadium, where I do my dropping surgery, and breathe the air. Come and breathe the air by Rouge Bouillon School. Come and breathe the air by Springfield School, and indeed all of the schools inside St Helier. Come and breathe the air with me. I hope you're not asthmatic. That's all I can say, as I am, because I can certainly taste it. But this does nothing, absolutely nothing to address that. But what it does do, it takes officers away from topics. And it was mentioned by, I think it was Deputy Morell, about how these are going to be repositioned. I would rather see that time spent on fixing the safety issues outside Springfield School that I've raised and been told, well, it'll be at least a year before anything happens. So that is not an adequate way forward. And so yet again, we have another scheme. Now, the closing of Broad Street, the issues over businesses and so on. First of all, I don't think we know the impact of it. I don't think we know what it's done, because I think there are a lot of pressure groups on both sides who want to see something happen. And I absolutely understand the sustainable transport groups that are just thinking, this is something. Something's happened. It's wonderful. But I'll ask them to think we need to go for a much wider impact with our sustainable transport policy. So what else is there that I wanted to mention on this? So there are phrases throughout this, and I picked some of them out. Necessary steps to improve. So there's a mention of measuring success. So how are we going to measure success of this project? Trying to be as positive as possible. We don't even measure air quality. I've been asking about it for the last 3 years. We were promised a system that isn't working. What are we going to measure? Footfall in town. But we've just been told it's not linked to driving into town. It's linked to footfall and transport. The real issue for town is access to town with a bus service that it goes beyond 9 o'clock at night for people, or 7 o'clock at night. The issue is the accessibility of buses and their affordability of public transport. So it's a genuine option for families. If it's more expensive to bring your family into town and back on the bus, you will take your car. It is simple, and we have done nothing, absolutely nothing to enable that. But we have given vast amounts of money to the bus company to maintain the status quo that we have. So do I vote for this? I don't know. Vote for it, vote against it, abstain. It's going to absolutely make no difference, because in the end, we are going to end up with a mishmash of Broad Street is closed, but apart from buses and apart from disabled drivers and apart from cyclists and apart from pedestrians, we've never, ever addressed shared spaces properly. And so we have members of the Assembly and members out there who are really anti-cycling because of the difficulty with shared space. I sort of understand it, but this is so solvable. Look around the world and it is solved by simply having proper markings, proper understanding, proper education for our population. And I do believe that the sustainable transport policy is meant to have that sort of education program for the population to educate them on what a shared space is. It's not here. Instead, we are spending hours talking about one street closed off every so often. And you know, don't get me wrong, the lovely pieces of grass and the chairs are lovely, absolutely lovely. And you can walk past the government offices now without getting run over. Although I will say that I am conditioned to walk on the pavement, I've realised. I don't think anyone's walking down the street, which is one issue. And I completely agree with cutting down emissions. And I want to mention one other thing about diesel buses, because let's just have a tirade. Let's enjoy ourselves. So in terms of diesel buses, the opportunity to replace diesel with a renewable fuel and make that cheaper was refused by the ministers and the Assembly, and I believe the Constable himself. And so the action didn't happen yet again. And forgive me for my annoyance at this, but we have spent so much time talking about a disjointed, complicated, confused, minimal impact policy on Broad Street. And we've lost track of everything else. So I think that what needed to happen here was that the St Helier itself needs rather than, well, let's put it this way. What this does is, and really importantly, is it sets a precedent for ad hoc planning decisions that are not part of a plan for St Helier. And if that's the way that we are going to create a sustainable transport corridor, I tell you what we're going to end up with. We're going to end up with the Eastern Cycle Pathway, which does not exist, or it does in dribs and drabs, because there was no coordinated approach to developing that in the long term. And we're back there again, and we're just going to do it with St Helier. At the same time, where we're building more and we're building more and we're building more, and everybody wants a car and everyone wants to drive. So there are difficult decisions to be made about our transport policy. There are difficult decisions to be made about our health in terms of our air quality and the quality of our city. There are difficult decisions to be made about climate change. This proposition does nothing about those decisions. And so it's very rare that I have no idea what to do with voting to this, because to be quite frank and without being rude, I really don't think it matters, because this will not achieve what people think it will achieve. So I don't know if I'm going to vote for these amendments. I don't know if the best situation is to give a reference back and say, please go away and come up with something with the parish and the minister, and just say you don't need to bring this to this Assembly and continuously waste our time. Because let's be frank, you're not going to get Liberty Bus to tell what you tell them, because they're going to do what they want anyway. Perhaps that's too frank for this Assembly, but it's probably the truth. So I leave it at that, but I'm extremely disappointed of the way this has gone and the time and energy this has taken. So we have a sustainable transport policy. We have a town council for St Helier. Get together, sort something out, come up with something coordinated, bring that to the Assembly as a bigger plan, and let's actually do something before the next election. That's what I suggest we do. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Chief Minister.
Sorry, sir. Just on my queue, I've got Deputy Higgins in front of me, sir.
No, you asked to speak above the voting list. I just didn't put a yellow agreement to it. So you did that.
Oh,
You are
apologies, sir. Yes, you're right. I've forgotten that.
first on my list. So.
So I'd lost track after the last speech. Yes, sir. It was interesting coming in, sir, after the last speaker, who has, I think, managed to add an nth degree of confusion onto the debate all by himself. I think let's be clear, this is not about a sustainable transport policy for St Helier. This is seizing an opportunity which does exist, which is about maintaining an area which has been, when I say relatively traffic free, pretty well entirely traffic free as in vehicle traffic, other than deliveries and the occasional bus, etc., at the right times for quite some time. And if one is serious about indicating and trying to achieve any behavioural change during this time of coming out of COVID, now is the time to do it. So if the deputy, as a St Helier deputy, doesn't like this and wants to prevaricate and cogitate and have a perfect plan, then that's great. And the reality is we'll be talking about it again in 3 years' time, if we're still all in the assembly. But this is about it's seizing the moment and saying, actually, there is something we can do, actually initially at relatively low cost, because we've been doing it already for quite some time, of improving a small part of St Helier, and again, sending that message around reducing the impact of the car. I take a number of the points he's made are correct. I can understand what he means about the ring road. I used to work on the edge of one part of that for quite some time and fully agree with the amount of traffic in St Helier. However, that is the reality of what we deal with, and equally the reality of small roads that we have going everywhere and lots of houses on either side. What I would like to do, sir, is commend the Minister, because he's had various grief at various points for the initial decision on closing Broad Street and then maintaining it, almost against all odds. But initially, it was very much about the coming together of people at the top end, up by Charing Cross, and the Crapo, or the toad on the pole, as sometimes it's referred to. So it is not just about outside where the government offices are at the moment, it is the entire length. What has become evident, and I think it's become evident, certainly I'm very supportive of the Constable's actions in this area, and certainly it's become evident to both me and him, that over a long period of time, over the last, whatever it's been, 10 months or something along those lines, that at various times, it's been noticeably better without having traffic using it as a thoroughfare. And I think both Deputy Young and others have alluded to it as this point about using it as a bit of a rat run to get to other places. And that actually then over time and at differing points of time in the day, school children are using it, and yes, it's occasionally on the odd skateboard. Cyclists are using it. Generally, they're being fairly careful, and yes, families pushing prams down there are using it, and therefore that gives the potential and indication of how that area could be improved further. So it is about changing behaviour. If we want to, I would suggest start impacting on the usage of cars, then the big challenge, which I would say would be one that we could achieve during the remaining life of this assembly, is tackling parking and parking charges. But that's probably a thing for a different day. When we've been talking about the wording of it, is that what the Minister again will clarify, but so I'm just making sure I'm looking at the right change. But on Part A, it's to maintain traffic restrictions to support the principles of pedestrian priority and through access by bicycle. And I think that was the point, was enabling access by bicycle rather than being so clarifying that it did allow cyclists up that area. The sustainable transport corridor is specifically in relation to that particular stretch of road, because as we announced earlier in the year, we are and discussions and funding and all the rest of it is being sorted, but we are intending to produce what I would hope is a big improvement for St Helier. It has to then be seen if it works. It'll be a trial scheme of what I think they're calling it the St Helier link bus, or the town link bus, which will be a loop, and enable short journeys to be made easily by a bus. And one of the things that's essentially part of this whole time period, and it is only till the end of this year, is how that route might work and Broad Street to date is quite an integral one for that. So this is about minimising the traffic impact on that area. I will just also challenge the deputy who just spoke with his obsession on Liberty Bus, or seems to be an obsession on negative obsession on Liberty Bus. Certainly from my experience, sir, and I was around when in what was then TTS under the present minister, when we had the handover of the contract from the previous incumbent to the present incumbent, it was difficult. But I would have no doubt, no hesitancy at all in saying that the present incumbent up to pre-COVID has achieved significant change in how the bus system used to operate over here, its effectiveness, and the significant increase that overall has taken place in bus ridership. And from memory, it's something like an over 40% increase. Now that has to be celebrated. I know the deputy is obsessed with having free buses for everywhere. Somewhere it's got to be paid for. And actually, I think one should focus on the differential between car usage and bus usage in price, but that's not by making buses free. We've had those arguments. And ultimately you end up with the wrong behaviour that comes through. But this is not a debate about sustainable transport policy, about the bus service or the hopper bus or whatever you want to call it. This is basically, do we, as an assembly, support the Conotab, and with the amendments which the Conotab is supporting of both the Minister and Deputy Gardner, which seek to just improve and clarify the proposition that the Conotab has brought to improve this small part of St Helier in a good way. What I would just say, so for me, it's very much a well-being exercise. I think the innovations that we've seen in the last week in the run-up to Liberation Day, with the use of Broad Street and the bunting, which is flapping outside my office usually, has been wonderful. And it shows the type of things that we can do there with a little bit of imagination. But obviously, the Minister has also alluded to, we've got to make sure that, particularly for things like emergency services, we've got to make sure the access stays. So I'll just pick up on one comment, I think it was from Deputy Truscott, where he talks about photographs and was waiting to see the tumbleweed. Obviously, I've been in and out of onto Broad Street quite a lot over the last 12 months, and I see it at various states in the day. And sometimes it is quiet, and at other times, sir, it is actually quite busy. I'm talking on the way down, and therefore, sir, I think it does have potential to be a significant improvement. And yes, there will be mixed views, but actually, people's routes and habits have settled down with Broad Street closed. Obviously, if one opens it, people will revert to type, and it'll be infinitely more difficult to ever to address that in the future. The proposition is until the end of this year, sir, and essentially, so I'm flicking through the thing, and the proposition is for the remainder of this year. So effectively, as a trial, there'll be clarification, consultation, sir. I think during and particularly at the end of that process, as I understand matters, and I very much commend the amendments of the Minister. I will be I'm very happy to support those of Deputy Gardner as well, but fundamentally, sir, I will be supporting the main proposition. I think it sends a good message, and I think we as an Assembly should be getting behind it. Thank you, sir.
Chief Minister, Deputy Ward seeks a point of clarification from you, I believe.
Yes, please, sir, if I may. Just because we're talking about.
I'm not going to seek to answer that. So I think we've made all the comments we've made, and if he wants to talk with me afterwards, he can do so.
Very well.
It is directly about something that was said in the speech, sir.
Well, no. I'm afraid, Deputy, the rule is that what you're effectively doing is asking the Chief Minister to give way for a point of clarification. If he doesn't accept that he should give way, then there is no possibility in understanding orders of raising a point of clarification. Very well. Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. And I'll start from the beginning. I agree with the majority of what Deputy Ward said earlier. But unlike him, I know what I'm going to do. I intend to vote against all the amendments and the proposition, which may seem surprising as a St Helier deputy and wanting the best for St Helier. But I'm being asked to support a proposition without knowing the impact on the road safety measures elsewhere in St Helier, and in particular in District 3 and 4. For example, road safety measures, including pedestrian crossings, have been identified and worked on by the department for some time. And if this goes ahead, I don't know if those improvements are going to be made, because we've been told the department has only finite resources. And if we have a consultation exercise, we're going to have to prioritise, and I don't know where the road safety measures on the inner road in St Helier are. And I don't think the Deputy Gardener even knows whether she'll get the road safety measures that she would like to see on Queen's Road. So I find that unacceptable, that we're going to be making a decision on this particular short stretch of road, which I agree with the Constable of St John, is piecemeal planning, and I think others have mentioned as well. We have a proposal that some businesses agree with, others disagree with. We don't know if we're going to be having a bus service yet. We don't know, for example, all the other sort of changes that are going on around that area. I'm still puzzled about knowing what's going on outside the Pom d'Or with the road improvements there. Are we rerouting the buses? Maybe I've missed that. But there are things going on. It seems to be piecemeal, and we don't know what we're doing. The other point I would make is the Constable is supporting this, but what he's actually doing is encouraging the thing we've talked about for years, the gravitation of St Helier towards the waterfront. All he has to do is walk down Queen Street and see how many shops are left there. And as you come down King Street, how we're starting to lose shops there as well. Is everything gravitating down to this area? Is it part of the plan that once we have our new administrative headquarters in the area near the Cenotaph, are we trying to bring people down to that part of town? What do the shopkeepers think about that further out? So I personally am not in favour of this as it is, because I do believe it's piecemeal. I believe that the St Helier Council should be involved in this and putting forward a proposal that I can get behind and other deputies can get behind to improve St Helier, and that would also meet, again, some of the objections that others from outside of town have actually had. I think that probably covers everything I want to say. I'm really disappointed with this debate. In fact, I wish it had gone back, and so I should be voting against as it stands at the current time, unless someone can come up with a really convincing argument for me to not do so. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Conor Tarverson.
Thank you, sir. I'm the process of losing my voice, which is always good. Firstly, sir, I think I speak for a number of members. I'm sort of a little confused about what we're actually voting for and what, if we approve this, what we're going to get at the end of it. But notwithstanding that, I really want to express a bit of disappointment about what we've got to here. And I can just refer members back to something that happened in St Wands. And you might think, well, what happens in St Wands has no relevance to town, but bear with me, please. We changed our zebra crossing up by our shops, and with the considerable amount of help from the infrastructure team. And the reason for mentioning this is that, in my view, they went about the job in the right way. They drew up the plan, explained it to us, then they went out to consultation to the shopkeepers in the area. They then consulted the local residents in the area, and then finally consulted the people that drive through the area. So at the end of that, we had a report back from them, which told us in figures how many people were for it, how many people were against it, and also gave us some evidence in terms of what their objections were. So when we looked at the proposition, we knew exactly what we were getting. We knew exactly who was for it, who was against it, and overall we knew what the overall benefits were to the parish. I mean, it's a much simpler proposition than opening and closing Broad Street, but nevertheless, as a parish, we were able to look at this and make a balanced decision based on evidence and fact. Now, I have to say that during this debate, I've heard a lot of hearsay evidence, but I haven't seen a lot of numerical facts or real evidence to back up what's being proposed. And that, to me, makes it a very difficult decision. And don't get me wrong, I have a great deal of sympathy for the Council of St Helier. I'm sure, and I've used Broad Street, that removing cars from Broad Street does have benefits in terms of reducing pollution down Broad Street, but then also there are knock-on effects to the shopkeepers in the area. Do they want it? Do they not? We don't know. We don't know how many of them want it or how many of them don't want it. We've no evidence from people who use Broad Street in quantifiable terms about whether they like it, whether they don't like it, what do they like about it, what don't they like about it. We don't have any real quantifiable evidence from any of the bus users. I mean, a survey surely should be done on bus users who come into town. We hear a lot of hearsay evidence from people who say it's inconvenient, they won't use the bus because it's being dropped, they're being dropped off at Broad Street. Well, how many? And how much does that make up of the total bus population that use Broad Street? These are facts, frankly, that we need to have in front of us before we can make a balanced decision. And because this information isn't in front of us in the form of a report with detail in it, I find it very difficult to make a decision on this. Frankly, I think I would support the Councillor St Helier because he is planning to do a survey. But to me, this puts the cart before the horse. We're being asked to make a decision about something when really we should be looking at the facts before we make that decision. And I can't see any facts. I can see a lot of hearsay evidence. I can see a lot of people who are happy about it, and I'm also hearing from people who are unhappy about it. But how many, who, and why? We need to know this information. And in terms of, you know, the impact on the buses, how will this impact the buses if we do this? What will be the cost of the reroute? How will it affect their business? And how does it affect the businesses in town? How much footfall will they gain? How much will they lose? Has anyone actually asked them? I don't think so, because I don't see that evidence. So in short, I think we need to do a proper report on this. Maybe if we approve this and then let St Helier, the parish of St Helier or infrastructure do this, we may be able to make a balanced decision. But at the moment, I don't think we have the facts to make that decision. Thank you, sir.
Much, Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. And I really wonder why, oh why, are we debating at length this amendment? It seems to me the amendment makes very little difference to what the constable wants to do. He's already said he'll accept the amendment. So we're spending what seems like hours discussing the minor details about something that may or may not happen, and which is very little difference between one scheme and another scheme. And I'm particularly worried because this is a temporary scheme, that here we are again mixing traffic with cycles, with pedestrians willy-nilly on some street that's only temporarily altered. And I wonder when we actually learn from our mistakes. Mixing traffic in another place in town has already caused one death. Will we see another death here? Because we've got a temporary scheme that's just been cobbled together. It's not even permanent, so we can make different markings, different road surfaces, etc. So I can't see the point of debating this much longer. And at the moment, because it really is something and nothing, I'm going to vote against it. Thank you.
Very much. The Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I'm for previous speaker because for me it's temporary. We're making a trial, and we have so many debates in this assembly that we don't have an evidence, but we are not allowing the trial. If we don't have a trial, we'll not have an evidence, and we are going rounds and rounds for 2 years. We do have sustainable transport policy, and I do agree with Deputy Ward that it hasn't been implemented as we expected. At the same time, we have very specific scheme now that can be trial, and we probably find the answers for the questions that was raised by Constable of St. One's, which are very valid questions, and we do need to have answers to them. But we do have an opportunity to try something new. Personally, sir, I cannot hear any more review, and the discussion and review and discussion. Let's try to do something. We will have some evidence. We'll do the consultation, and if it doesn't work, we'll not continue from the 1st of January. I'm a bit disappointed with St. Helier deputies, interestingly enough. Constable brought his proposition to the deputies' meeting more than months ago. Constable asked for our suggestions as deputies. If you are not agreeing with the proposition as a deputy, fair enough, express it. Personally, I didn't want to review disabled parking, and I'll speak about this in my amendment. and I brought an amendment to the constable proposition, which we discussed. We come here to try something new. It will be a bigger plan, but we cannot continue to stop things happening because it's not fully presented, and we cannot stop the full when it is a bigger presentation. We're saying it's not enough details and we are voting down there. So I think we need to try something new and hopefully find evidence and make a evidence-based decision in January if it will continue or not. So I would be supporting Minister's amendment. I would be supporting the proposition. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy Labby.
Thank you, sir. And I share the frustration of other speakers. When the level of a debate on such a specialised and technical area descends into, I saw a photo of Broad Street at 2:30 and there's no one in it, or let's just go back to the way it was, we risk reputational damage, with the greatest respect. I have watched Broad Street an awful lot since this trial started, and I've used it an awful lot. And Deputy Ward is right. It took a long time before people, and some don't even now, came off the pavements. We were all used to walking on some of those very thin pavements on Broad Street, and we stayed there for a long time before we ventured out onto the road and believed that there wasn't going to be a bus coming down it. But things have changed and grown, and as I say, using Broad Street now, especially with the sun coming out, that area has completely changed in atmosphere and is starting to be used a lot more. Those silver benches around the tree planters, people are using them all the time to sit and gather and meet and talk and have a coffee. And it just shows you, I don't want to create another pedestrian precinct. I want to create a place, a beautiful area where the cars and the buses and maybe the cycles aren't. Not a pedestrian precinct, but there's a big difference between pedestrian priority and pedestrian only. There is huge potential here if we are to take the traffic out of Broad Street in creating something very pleasing and very beneficial to the town. Whenever these sort of things are proposed, and I've seen it in London an awful lot, the traders generally are very wary of it, and they have very often been proved wrong by when spaces are created that people want to use and be in. It does generate trade. So it's better than a precinct. It's been better than King Street and Queen Street, which is now just really a stampede of shoppers, because it's twice as broad at the obelisk end, and there is potential there for a square, or well, it's a triangle, but it would feel like a square. So this original proposition, I'm going to turn my sound down a bit. This original proposition from the Constables and Helier was to keep this trial going, keep the current status quo with no traffic at all, keep it going until the end of the year. And I thought that was a good idea. And that gave us the opportunity to see what happens through the course of the year, see what happens during the summer, see what happens around Christmas time. And to collect the data and talk to people, talk to the traders, talk to those that are using it. I wonder if those senior members of our society who often like to use the post office and the Alliance next door now, whether they feel it's actually they're getting used to it and it's better, and whether if there was a bus stop at the obelisk end, that might mitigate the fact that they've lost it right outside the post office, because that road actually was always a bit tricky with people trying to cross it at the wrong places and with the heavy traffic. So as somebody who's not into pedestrianisation per se, I have been convinced by the change in atmosphere that taking traffic out of Broad Street has created, and one can see the potential for creating something that would benefit the town hugely, and other areas will have to be found for hopper buses or perhaps cycles as well, and the big main buses. But one of those coming down every 15 minutes is going to destroy what is being created, what is evolving, what is happening before our very eyes. So my inclination, I'm afraid, is to go back to what we were originally asked to trial and extend, the Constable's original proposition, forget the amendments, give this a go, maintaining it, because it's going to be harder if we change back again. People have retrained and they're using the space well and enjoying it. I think let's talk to them. Let's send some people down with clipboards and see what people have to say about it. But I think it would be retrograde to go back to how it was. And I think we should go back to what the Constable was originally asking for here. Let's keep this going a little bit longer, see how it goes, talk to everybody, collect the data, but turning back the clock will set us back. And I just despair sometimes. I mean, I know that the Environment Minister wanted to speak in this debate. Again, he didn't realise he'd spoken first time. But, you know, we have so many people talking about improving air quality, and the Environment Minister is at the vanguard of that, always. And here's an opportunity. But it does mean doing something bold and decisive, and something that may not be universally popular yet until we've got all the pieces in place. It does mean making a difficult, tricky decision. But I think it will be to the benefit of St Helier, so I'm going to reject the amendment, even on the Constable's say so, I'm afraid, and I'm just going to go with, hopefully, his proposition in its purity. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I won't speak for too long, and I'll try and restrain myself from having a rant, even though that's what I feel like doing at this point, because here we are again, our island's parliament, pretending it's a 49-member traffic management committee. I really think that it is not right that our island's parliament involves itself in these sorts of debates. I said exactly the same thing when the debate happened on Green Street, and I agree with every single thing that Deputy Ward said earlier about how these matters ordinarily ought to be dealt with. I will say, though, that in amongst that feeling, I also have a bit of feeling of sympathy for the Constable. I can see why he wants to bring a proposition like this forward. And when push comes to shove, I reckon that closing Broad Street to most traffic would probably be a good thing. I don't quite understand a lot of the anger that the temporary closure of it has caused for people. I don't think it's anywhere near as inconvenient as it's being made out to be, and I think it's something that could theoretically provide a very good opportunity for improving a part of our town centre and improving accessibility, and all of that is theoretically something to be welcomed. But I think part of the reason we're here with a proposition before us anyway is because of the utter failure there has been from the government to come up with any sort of initiative, any real initiative when it comes to the carbon neutral agenda and the sustainable transport policy, which, let's be honest, may as well not exist. It's a complete waste of paper. So that I can understand why it leads some people to want to try and take issues in isolation to at least end up with some progress rather than nothing. But it isn't a sensible way forward to have a better, more rounded approach to these issues that consider all the other issues to make sure it actually works in the long run. I think a much better way of doing this is not to debate this on the floor of the States Assembly, but it is for the Infrastructure Minister and his officers to be sat round a table with the St Helier Council, the Roads Committee, the Constable, and to do this properly. This is not the way to do it. I will certainly be voting against this amendment. And when it comes to the main proposition, probably also as well. And I know that will probably anger the Constable, given that I've said that closing Broad Street is probably a good idea, but this isn't the way to do it. We need to do much better than this. And I hope the Assembly doesn't waste too much more time pretending to be a traffic management committee, because that's not what we are.
Thank you very much, Senator. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? If no other member wishes to speak on this amendment, then I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. And can I start by saying thank goodness for the mute button on my computer. I will start with Constable St Helier with some very good points for target date. Senator Farnham mentioned pollution and green diesel. We are trying to promote that as much as we can. In fact, most of the state's fleet will be on green diesel in the very near future. We've been trying it as an experiment for a while, and the results are very good indeed. There is obviously a cost implication which we're trying to offset. We're trying to encourage Liberty Bus to go green as soon as possible. There will need to be some adjustment there. They would need, I understand, written authority from Mercedes. This is just a routine thing, so it doesn't invalidate the guarantee of the engines. Constable of St John mentioned Vine Street. That's something we are looking at. There is some parking there, which we can hopefully use. But obviously, when jurats are sitting as, dare I say, High Court judges or thereabouts, that they must have secure parking nearby, which you're more than well aware of, sir. Parking by the library, I would imagine the Constable meant Library Place, as the actual main library would be far too far away. That is something that's been looked at by the department. Constable St Bernard mentioned electric buses. That is something we have trialled in cooperation, obviously, with Liberty Bus. An electric bus was brought over and it was very successful. There was a problem, an electrical problem with the bus. It was just a loaner, so that had to go back. But it's early days yet with electric buses, basically with the infrastructure that we would need to charge all the buses. But that's definitely in the pipeline, and I would like to see go electric as soon as possible. Again, Deputy Young mentioned green diesel, and Deputy Taddy, I think, mentioned 40%, or the Chief Minister actually, yes, mentioned 40%. Prior to COVID, the bus service was actually up 40%. And it does irk me sometimes when the bus company is criticised, because it's actually been mentioned in the Houses of Parliament, been mentioned at Westminster, that this is the way to run a bus company. And they've done exceedingly well. And there are lots of companies around the world have actually got in touch to see how they exactly do it. Deputy Higgins mentioned road safety. Absolutely, road safety is paramount for us, and the hopper bus. But that's why basically we need to take a bus down Broad Street because of the hopper bus and the general service. So one bus every 15 minutes down there. That Broad Street has to be kept open anyway to an extent, because obviously up to 11 a.m. in the morning, there are delivery trucks, refuse vehicles, and various other vehicles that would need to go down there to clean the area. And as we found out to our cost recently, there was a very bad fire in the Charing Cross area, and we would obviously need to get emergency vehicles down Broad Street should the need arise. I think Deputy Sutherland mentioned bus drivers. They're actually PSV trained and extremely skilled drivers. Deputy Gardner, I thank Deputy Gardner for her kind comments. I'm not quite sure where Deputy Labbe is coming, stop cycling, but we're trying to go green. That's the whole thing. We'll go as green as we can. But, and Senator Mezek, what can I say? Thank you. I agree 100%. We can't have 49 traffic managers, but you know, infrastructure does its best. We are behind on the program, that is for sure. We've had people that have left and moved to the UK. We get people retiring, and we are training people up as fast as we can in the department. And we often get accused of taking experts from the UK. That's not happening through COVID. You're not going to get anybody over here. You know, it's not really on. So sustainable transport corridor set reflects the STP transport hierarchy: walking, cycling, and then buses. Above single occupancy private cars. This might be semantics, but I felt it important to make the point. I mean, such a corridor would provide a bus advantage route. We're encouraging people to get on the bus, not use cars. And people complaining that, members complaining that nothing's happening, all I can say is watch this space over the next 3 or 4 weeks. We've got the Eastern bus lane opening up in the not too distant future. Further into the future, the Western bus lane, which will cut 10 minutes off bus routes. It's all happening with as fast as we can get it going, sir. So I won't go on too long. All I can say is thank you for members who did support this. But I say this is about getting people on the bus. It's not about pollution. That's the Environment Minister is doing what he can, monitoring pollution. But as I say, there's an awful lot of people with mobility problems who want to get the bus straight into Broad Street, get off, do their shopping, get on and away again. It is a long walk from the bus station, and we've spoken to Liberty Bus. It is not practical to have a bus going up Church Street. It's simply not practical to do that. So I will ask members, sir, if they would just to vote for 1, page 2, paragraph A, and 2, paragraph B. And as I say, 3 has been withdrawn. So I ask members for their support, sir.
Right, Minister, Deputy Southern asked for a point of clarification. Do you give way for a point of clarification?
Indeed, sir.
Deputy Southern.
Yes, the Minister said I mentioned bus drivers. I did no such thing.
I beg the Deputy's pardon, sir, but so somebody mentioned the quality of drivers. Well, it was, no, don't mention bus drivers, I beg your pardon. My illustration was the Deputy said someone's already been run over, and I'm illustrating the point that the Liberty Bus drivers are PSV trained and very, very skilled, sir. That was the point I'm making. And apologies for any misinterpretation.
Very well. Now, do you wish to take these paragraphs separately, Minister, or to deal with them together?
Yes, we take them separately, sir.
Very well. Then the vote is on paragraph 1. And I ask the greffier to put a vote into the link. I open the voting and ask members to vote in the normal way. Members have had the opportunity of casting the votes. Ask the greffier to close the voting.
Sorry, sir, I've spelt it wrong, but I'm having a difficulty getting into vote. I do apologise.
That's all right. I've recorded your vote in the chat as a contre.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
The first paragraph has been adopted. 26 votes pour, 15 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, with a further vote pour and a further vote contre noted in the chat. I think 2 votes contre noted in the chat, but that doesn't change the result. Very well. We now move on to the second paragraph of the amendment, and I ask the greffier to put a vote into the link. The vote is now on the link, and I open the voting and ask members to vote. I'm not counting anything that appears above the link. It's only those that appear under the link that will be counted.
So was that for the Councillor of St Mary's? Ah, he's voted again. Thank you.
Very much. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the Secretary to close the voting. Paragraph 2 has been adopted. 26 votes for, 16 votes contra, no abstentions in the link, and 1 vote contra and 1 vote for in the chat. Very well. Those elements of the amendments have been adopted. We now move on to the amendment proposed by Deputy Gardner, and I ask the referee to read the amendment.
Page 2, paragraph C. For paragraph C, substitute the following paragraphs and redesignate the subsequent paragraphs accordingly. C, to review and, where necessary, take the necessary steps to improve 1. Cycling access to Broad Street and within the pedestrian priority area, and 2. Servicing and delivery access to business premises in the pedestrian priority area. D, to introduce by 31st of July 2021, 1. Extra on-street parking for disabled drivers in the central town area, particularly in close proximity to Broad Street, and 2. Following consultation with Liberty Bus services to and from the pedestrian priority area.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. I will try to make it as quick and clear as possible. When I looked at the original proposition, at the part C of the original proposition, I was struggling with the word review. What I've done, I took 1 and 3 from the part C. So the part C of the original proposition remained as it is without point 1 and point 3. And what I asked and created D is to introduce by 31st of July extra on-street parking for disabled drivers in the central town area, particularly in close proximity to Broad Street, and follow consultation with the Liberty Bus to and from pedestrian priority area. Basically, my amendment is to remove the need for this review, as we had a conversation over the year about options, and to allow steps be taken further without delays to improve the issues raised by elderly and disabled people and several constituencies of mine. But from what I now understood from previous speakers like Deputy Truscott, Constable St. John, Constable St. Brulat, the issues of disabled parking and bus was raised with them. And these were the main concerns that people had against closure of the streets. Basically, St. Helier is changing and no longer just a shopping area for the rest of Jersey, even though that it's still a shopping area and we would like to have a vibrant high street. What we need is a middle way, a balanced approach to manage St. Helier in a way that is good for all residents and businesses. And it's a very challenging task. We'll never get 100% right. As we need to accommodate the needs of the less mobile whilst also creating more walking and cycling routes. I want to find a solution that benefits everyone, and clearly taking away a bus stop and some disabled parking is not a win-win situation. So there is no a scenario where we're taking away the bus route and disabled parking to win everyone. And this is the reason that I opposed the review and asking to take an action and introduce these two things within the closure, within the trial of closing the street. One, that the closure of the street will increase walking and cycling in the central St. Helier, and at the same time will retain current level of convenience for bus users and disabled drivers that they had before the pandemic. And for me, it's important that it is a trial. We'll get better understanding what works and what doesn't work, and can make more considered decision later. So I'll move my amendment forward.
Very much. Deputy, is the amendment seconded? Any member wish to speak on the amendment? No member wishes to speak on the amendment. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to try and include an obsession with buses, and I hope that the Minister for Infrastructure is professional enough not to mute another state's member when he should be listening to a debate, because I believe that ministers should have the courtesy and professionalism to be listening.
Deputy, could I interrupt you there?
Sorry.
If someone has muted, they are not able to be heard. It's not that if they turn off, I don't think the minister was suggesting he wasn't listening. I think he was suggesting it was better that he didn't have the chance to speak.
I interpreted it a different way, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think that's what
I'm glad you made that, because I'm sure that would not be the case. Thank you. So in terms of this, let's get on to my obsession with buses. I'm quite happy to answer a clarification from the Chief Minister. If he wants to talk about that obsession with buses, I'm happy to clear that up. Buses are a really good means of public green travel, particularly if they're done properly. A bus access to this road at the end of the road is common sense, absolutely common sense. Totally agree with Deputy Gardner. The problem is, and I will vote for this amendment, don't get me wrong, but my worry for you, for the minister, for the deputy, sir, is that in dealing with Liberty Bus and consulting, you won't necessarily get what you want. And this has been the problem all along. And this is not about having a downer on a company. I don't know anything about the company. We can't find out, certainly can't find out much about their accounts and finances and where the money that we pump into this company goes to. So that's another reason I perhaps have an obsession, sir. But what we need to be careful of is that we have yet again a real good attempt to try and improve what is a rather esoteric proposition that promises so much but doesn't really do a lot, but try and improve it to put some meat on the bones, if I may use that phrase, to actually say to review and where necessary take the necessary steps, actually do something. That's great. Cycling access to Broad Street. So I believe that cycling access is already there. Ironically, when I cycle in, which is quite frequently, I don't cycle along Broad Street because I come along the pathway crossover and then come along on the road that hits Broad Street at the top. So I avoid Broad Street because there is no way into Broad Street that way cycling. And on the way back, so it's easy to go the other way, but that's much of a muchness. So in terms of service and delivery access to business premises, may I contribute something constructive there? You could do that. I would like to have seen, and the Constable of St Helier knows about this because he knows the businesses in town. One business in particular that I know of, or a couple of them, who use cargo bikes for their deliveries. And if you wanted to seriously talk about delivery and not interrupt delivery to businesses, why not use cargo bikes? And then you could actually do something about cutting cars and diesel engines in that area. But what we've got again is, and I understand the concept of a middle ground, but sometimes in a middle ground you lose the benefits. And I'm just worried that that may happen here. And I would like to see us think really carefully about that. On-street parking for disabled drivers, yes, absolutely. It's something again that we need to make sure that we do. And so I think what we do need, though, and what does need to come this are two very important things. One is to get clear once and for all the way that shared spaces work and how that shared space is going to work in the centre of town. Because you hear so often, oh, those cyclists just drive right into you without even thinking. So I don't think that's the case. I think there's exceptions to every rule, but I think so we need to work on that. And second, whenever we have a review, if you review anything, if you want to find out, you have to be clear about what those success criteria are of that review. And I would like to ask, because it was said we'll get better understanding, and I would like to know what the understanding is that is being looked for. Is it the level of pollutants? Is it the level of particulates at particular times during the day in that area? If so, you're going to need to monitor it. Just say again, good luck with that one. Is it the number of cars? Is it the number of people who are walking through that area? Is it the number of people who are sat there having a cup of coffee? And Deputy Russell Labby said, mentioned a great point about it could be a really nice, vibrant area, and we all want to see that. I'd love to see, like these, you know, when you go to these, when we remember when we used to go to cities in Europe and visit for the weekend and so on, and it was great sitting out there. It's fantastic, and there are spaces in town where that works. Around Millennium Park, it's absolutely beautiful space in the summer. You can sit outside at the cafes, and it's fantastic. And I would love to see that for the Centre of St Helier. But we need to know if we are reviewing what it is we are reviewing and what the success criteria are. Otherwise, we will end up with lots of numbers and lots of sentences and no conclusion again. And without being critical, well, yes, being critical, I'm afraid we have seen so much of that, particularly around the area of climate, etc. And I'm afraid until we see some concrete outcomes, some real changes, and some genuine improvements to areas that we are trying to improve that are actually directly relevant to this, then I'm afraid this is just a greenwash. And that is counterproductive for any move forward in addressing climate change, addressing our impact on our environment, because we feel we're doing something, but we're not. So review, you know, what was the phrase? It was commit to a review. So I can honestly say I've committed to review my weight, my eating habits, my levels of exercise. I have done so, sir, for many, many years, but I'm not sure I've had the outcomes that I wanted. And I just hope that we don't do this again with yet another project. And just for those who are interested, yes, I will speak in the final debate, and I'll try to mention buses again, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. And I have a lot of sympathy with Deputy Ward and his comments about greenwash. We had a lengthy debate during the last debate, and it was sad to hear members express their frustrations and their cynicism, really, in relation to these matters. But on balance, though, I voted in favour of the previous amendments, and I will be voting in favour of these amendments because we do have to do something. So little has been done in relation to the sustainable transport policy. The arguments have been well rehearsed, but for example, at the beginning of this term, I spent some time talking to people about cycling and how we can encourage cycling, particularly in and around St Helier, which is particularly difficult to navigate on a bicycle. I was told at that point that there were moves underway to create a corridor of trees so that anyone entering St Helier on a bicycle would be able to follow the trees and know that that was the route for them to take. There's still no sign or sight or even talk of that corridor of trees, which is a great shame. So I will be supporting this as an attempt to at least see some credible move in the right direction, although I absolutely take on board the fact that it isn't connected to any other cycle routes, which is a great shame. We have an incredibly long way to follow. But I also will be supporting this amendment by Deputy Gardiner, because in the truest sense of representing her constituents and listening to the public, and particularly those who have specific needs, she is meeting those requirements and needs by bringing this amendment and helping to assist those who may struggle with mobility and getting around town and who may find the moves to pedestrianise Broad Street a matter of difficulty for them. So I commend her for doing that, and I will be supporting her amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. Senator Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I very much agree in support of Deputy Ward. Obviously, Deputy Ward has a very, very clear view, and full marks to him, and he's absolutely right. Deputy Ward has a vision of environmental transformation of society, and that is, increasingly one shares and understands his frustration with the rate of progress. And of course, in a perfect world, I would absolutely agree that very much. I want to see that too. But of course, I think over the years, I've certainly become, I suppose, the previous speaker spoke about the word cynical. Is it cynical? I think I've had to be realistic with our system, which is not a good, I don't believe, the way our government system is organised to be able to achieve that level of visionary transformation change with a buy-in from our community and policies. And that is, again, a story for another day. And I'm very pleased there's work going on at what we can do to improve it. And so in the meantime, we have to make progress by steps. We have to go, every time we manage to get one move forward, we should bank it and celebrate it and try and build upon that to the next. And that's the approach I've taken. It doesn't stop us shooting for the stars, but arriving at the moon is pretty good. And so that's what drives me here when I'm faced with choices like this. And of course, it's very frustrating that what we had was, I thought, a really quite decent, clear amendment from from a proposal from the Conitables. And then we've got into what is a really frankly chaotic debate on bits and pieces of amendments with contradictions and so on. Frankly, I've struggled with this to make head of it like other members. But in the end, I came down the fact that, OK, there's a vision there that we can't achieve in day one. Therefore, the infrastructure minister has done an amendment to try and find, if you like, a middle way, which is going to make progress, but it gives him the opportunity to move and respond. And the key, I'm very, so I supported him on point A. I've never had any problem with that. Point B, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, although frankly, I was troubled about what was said about the bus service, say that it's not possible to do a bus service through the middle of town other than go through Broad Street. And so what I'm hoping in supporting Deputy Gardner's amendment is that the inclusion that Deputy Gardner has put under D2, which is about, point D now, which is about the following consultation with Liberty bus services to and from the pedestrian priority area. And I want to see that, and I very much hope the infrastructure minister will take that seriously. And rather than shut the door on finding ways of achieving an alternative to blasting a bus down Broad Street, just doing it a few yards, probably meters down the road in Church Street or in Library Place, I would have thought is really worth discussing. And I very much agree too with the first point, D1, about extra on-street car parking, because we absolutely need to provide for disabled drivers in the central area. And I heard the minister say that it's too far away. What, Library Place too far away from the central area? Really? So look, I asked the minister, I've given him support, I've given him the benefit of the doubt. I very much hope that this amendment of Deputy Gardner will go through, and we will have an element of delivery. So yes, we've got the words used in the now, which is now called a sustainable transport corridor. I don't think anybody else quite know what that means, but nonetheless, I can't argue against the principle because it sounds right, but it's for the minister to translate it into action. So I hope that the minister and other members will embrace also Deputy Gardner's proposition, amendment, and let's get the new amendment. The whole thing is then agreed, and we've got a decent trial And if things don't work exactly right, we can change it and adjust it. And I think at least we do make some progress. And so that's why I should be supporting Deputy Gardner. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. And my colleague, Deputy Ward, has it absolutely spot on. It's greenwash. I can't vote for greenwash. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak on the amendment?
Yes, please, sir.
Very well, Senator Ferguson.
Thank you very much.
Just remind my members, please, to indicate a desire to speak in the chat in the normal way. But Senator Ferguson, yes.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, I was just thinking back. I used to have a shop in Halkett Street, and I remember the kerfuffle when, you know, in those days you could drive up and down it, which was positively lethal. And there was a terrific furore when it was pedestrianised. But in actual fact, it was so much better. You know, the goods you had in the window didn't get covered in, you know, sort of particles or particulates. I may not believe in climate change, but I do believe in environmental stuff. And I also had a shop later on next to the post office on Broad Street. The windows needed cleaning at least 3 times a week. And the same thing with the clothes in the window. Again, everything was absolutely filthy. On one occasion, I sold, basically the shop was selling kilts and things Scottish. So one Saturday I had a piper play outside the shop, which was a sort of forerunner of the Connétable St Helier's idea of busking and so on. However, eventually the police came round to ask me to tell them to stop because the traffic was backed up all the way to West Park. You know, I know we're going to have to think outside the box, but in actual fact, it does make a much pleasanter environment in town. And I will actually support this amendment of Deputy Gardner. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy Lewis.
Thank you, sir. And just to clarify, which you very kindly did earlier on, sir, I do get a little frustrated when I get misquoted, so I actually mute myself prior to shouting at my computer, but wouldn't dream of muting anybody else. In response to Deputy Ward mentioned cargo bikes, they are a different frame, weight and size, and I actually signed off on this about 3 weeks ago. So cargo bikes are definitely happening and they're in general use now, and we encourage people to use them. I've been cycling around the Netherlands for some time, and I've actually been enrolled in the Delft Cycling Academy, so I'm picking up lots of tips from them. Very happy to encourage more cycling. And Deputy Young mentioned a bit of misinterpretation. I didn't say Library Place was too far. I thought a previous speaker had mentioned the library, which would be too far away, and I'm presuming they meant Library Place. And regarding disabled parking, we already have disabled spaces at the moment, which we always try to increase. We've got actually 34 spaces at Sand Street, which is about 100 yards away. We've got 24 dedicated disabled spaces, plus shop mobility have a further 10. These are reserved spaces, plus anyone with a disabled badge can park on any floor at any time, which gives 500 spaces feasibly. So I thank members, sir. I'm keen to support Deputy Gardner, sir. I will do my very best to reach the 31st of July. That's not an easy target to hit, but I will do my very best, sir. Thank you.
Very much indeed. Minister, any other member wish to speak on this amendment? No other member wishes to speak on the amendment. Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Gardner to respond.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for everyone who contributed to this debate. I would like to echo Deputy Young's comment about the vision that Deputy Ward has, and I do see lots of common in our vision. We work a lot together around the sustainable transport policy, and I commend for his dedication to this. I also thank you for Deputy Ward for bringing the cargo bikes. It's something that it's really been something very clear and practical to the debate. We need to work a lot with the Liberty Bus, and we need to look what's the next step for Jersey with the bus engagement. And another point, definitely important to look how we work with shared spaces. We don't have experience, we don't work with shared spaces, and probably, like it's happening in Europe, we'll need to look more and more into the shared spaces as the space is limited in Jersey. Thank you for Deputy Young and Senator Moore for their support, as I'm echoing and I am agreeing. This is the attempt to move to the right direction. These are the steps that we are trying to be practical. Yes, it's not perfect, but let's try. Hopefully it will not. And if we tried and it didn't work, we say we tried, and we can maybe adjust it. Thank you for the minister, and I also hope that the minister, I do believe that the minister will do his best to find an alternative solution for the bus stop from the pedestrian area, not just to the bus street, and also for the disabled parking spaces in the proximity of the Broad Street. I hope it will work out in the best interest of everybody, because if this street can be pedestrianized and at the same time we can address the needs of residents that have special needs, it will be more win-win solution. And I'm grateful for Senator Ferguson that bringing this example of the Hawkett place, because I wasn't aware, I wasn't probably here. I don't remember this was open there for the traffic. And the process that people pass, that people are not happy and how it can work without, but actually it does work. And we all now enjoy this pedestrian space in the central St. Helier. So I would like to finish my closing speech with actually echoing Senator Ferguson. Let's think outside the box. It's much pleasant place can be done in town, and hopefully it will work. So I'll move to the vote.
Thank you very much. I ask the referee to place a vote into the link. The vote is on Deputy Gardner's amendment to the proposition. And I open the voting and ask members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Ask the referee to close the voting. And the amendment has been adopted. 36 votes pour, 7 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 3 votes pour counted in the chat. Very well. We now return to the debate on the main proposition as amended. Does any member wish to speak on the main proposition? If no member wishes to speak on the main proposition, Deputy Ash.
Thank you, sir. The Assembly never ceases to amaze and amuse, sir. We move very easily from international incidents and high finance to what could, I suppose, best be described as parochial matters in a seamless manner. The Reform Party have provided both today, sir. I think we had an amazing moment for me. Deputy Southern spoke a lot of sense about wasting time on an amendment or amendments that made little difference, and he was absolutely right. I think 2 hours on something where many should have been speaking on the main debate, and we spoke on the amendment. We had Deputy Ward, sir, declaring that he was finding it very difficult to speak, but then he spoke for about 20 minutes, so he obviously got over that difficulty. Senator Mizek made a very valid point, I think, where he said that we have 40-odd town planning experts, and I think that's true, and at times we have to trust on what experts would tell us. And of course, just before lunch, we had Deputy Tadier talking bollards, which may or may not amaze, sir. But he also mentioned his dislike of the phrase town centre experience. And I'm fully with him on that. It's one of a number of awful modern idioms that have entered government parlance and modern day parlance. I'm not a believer in the death penalty, sir, but if I was, I think I would bring it back for expressions such as that and blue sky thinking, etc. But let's go with what he said about that particular use of the town centre. Should we phrase it that way? And it's just to look at this in three different ways, I suppose, if you like, of why you would vote for this particular proposition that's put forward by the constable, well-meaning though it may be. If you're voting to make cycling easier, and I know we have several members who'd probably see Robert Mugabe as a decent sort of bloke if he'd worn lycra, but if you're voting for that, then yes, you're probably right. It will make cycling easier, and perhaps it is something we should be looking at. And if that is your reason for voting it, then that is 100% correct. If you're looking for it to be a panacea to the ills of the high street, then I'm afraid that you're barking up a completely erroneous tree. The high street's problems are many, principally, in my view, the internet. The internet has taken over the high street, not just in Jersey, but throughout the United Kingdom and indeed the world. Jersey has its own particular problems with ludicrously high rents, retail rents I'm talking about. I know that that Senator Mezek also has a problem, and I think we all do with housing rents, but retail rents are just as high. We have one of perhaps the best locations of any shop in St Helier in what used to be the Baygown site, and has now been empty, I would guess, for getting on for 2 years. Again, down principally to the high rents charged. So we are not going to move away by opening Broad Street to suddenly revitalise a high street riddled with high rents. So let's put that on the table. Also, if we're looking to vote to make life easier for many elderly or disabled people, then again, we will not be making life easier for elderly and disabled people. Many, many elderly and disabled people use Broad Street to drop off their elderly relatives or disabled relatives, where they can skip across the road to Marks and Spencer's and do the shops in that vicinity and then be picked up again. So, and I know we often overlook the elderly and have done as an assembly, to my great regret. I think we've too often focused on other areas, and it's something we really should get back to focusing on. But those are my views on this, and I think it's something that people should reflect on before they vote on this. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. It's been a frustrating but also very interesting debate, and there's no question I hear those who have said, let's make this decision based on evidence, because one of my commitments when I joined, it was stood for this assembly, was to try to banish the days of evidence-free decision making, which recurs and recurs and recurs. I also feel what must be the frustration of certain members of the Assembly who have brought propositions where I have quite reasonably said, I'd love to support your proposition, but this proposition needs to be part of a wider plan. I'm thinking of free buses or free GPs. It needs to be part. I remember with Deputy Sullivan's free GPs proposition saying, you know, the Health Minister has said that he's bringing forward a plan. This needs to be part of that plan. It can't stand alone. I said similarly to Deputy Ward on his free buses propositions, and I mean that. And so now to be on the other side and to see a proposition which isn't really based on any data or any evidence, but being supported by senior members of the government, makes you think, hold on, but I've voted down propositions in the past because they weren't part of a bigger plan. And now we've got senior leaders of the government asking us to do exactly that, vote for something which isn't part of a bigger plan, and really should be part of a bigger plan. And so in the absence of evidence, data, as in empirical evidence, where do we turn? And the only place I can really think of turning is to places which have also pedestrianised in the past. Now, one place we could look at is King Street and Queen Street, which used to be before, I believe before I was born, used to have traffic running through them, and now seem to be highly successful shopping streets. And certainly, whilst obviously COVID has massively reduced footfall in those streets, before COVID, they were streets that were packed, particularly throughout the summer. And we can also look to those streets here in Jersey, but we can also look elsewhere. And this whole debate brought to mind an article I'd read about the experience of a town in Galicia in Spain called Pontevedra. And I looked at that for evidence. And interestingly, the article actually starts with, people don't shout in Pontevedra. With all but the most essential traffic banished, there are no revving engines or honking horns, no metallic snarl of motorbikes, none of the usual soundtrack of a Spanish city. Now, don't get me wrong, Broad Street has never been quite that metallic soundtrack of a Spanish city, but still, it's had engines, it's had revving, it's had the beeping of horns, and at the moment, those are gone. Also look down, and perhaps slightly more empirical rather than quantitative evidence. On the same streets where 30 people died in traffic accidents from 1996 to 2006, only 3 have died in the subsequent 10 years. So road traffic accidents immediately reduced. CO2 emissions are down by 70%. Nearly 3/4 of what were car journeys are now made on foot or by bicycles. And importantly, while other towns in the region of Galicia are shrinking, Pontevedra has gained 12,000 new inhabitants. Now, again, I'm not claiming that the pedestrianisation of Broad Street will gain any new inhabitants to St Helier. I'm sure people come to St Helier regardless. But the idea that pedestrianisation revitalises somewhere, I think, is there and can be seen empirically. And so what I am saying is that I agree that this is an evidence-free proposition, sadly. I wish it wasn't, but it has an important caveat, and that is that it is a trial until the end of the year, and it is during that trial that we need to gather that data and that evidence. Now, unfortunately, the proposition also just requires the Minister to report to the Assembly, which doesn't mean the Assembly is going to vote on it. I think that's really important. Anyone who thinks we'll get to vote on this again, we probably won't. The Minister has to provide a report, that's it. But of course, if that report is in any way negative, showing that, or perhaps of inadequate quality, then any member of the Assembly can choose to bring a proposition saying that trial should come to an end. And on top of that, I've thought in my position with delegated responsibility for retail, what can I do? Can I do anything at all? Because at the end of the day, I'm interested in this from a retail perspective. I feel that it is likely, when I look at the experience of towns like Pontevedra, when I look at King Street and I look at Queen Street, it is likely, in my opinion, that those shops on Broad Street will benefit from the pedestrianisation of Broad Street and an attractive area to walk down. But we need to count that, and we need to know whether that is the case. And so what I will do following this is I will look at the various means to see if it's possible to get another footfall counter onto Broad Street. That would fit in with the interim retail strategy, and that would give us, especially if it's done as quickly as possible, that would give us a sense of the data as to whether the pedestrianisation has increased people's shopping activity in Broad Street. I can't guarantee that I will get that because we will need funding. We'll have to find the funding from somewhere, but it's something that I will certainly look into, and I will try my best to get in there. And moving on from there, we really should have, especially if it does end up being pedestrianised, we really should have a footfall counter in Broad Street. We should understand what's happening to the retail stores in that area going forward. And so it's been a tough one for me, this one. I don't like the lack of evidence, but I do feel there is evidence from here in St Helier, and just enough evidence here in St Helier from towns like Pontevedra to tell me that it's worth a trial, it's worth a go. And I look forward to that report, and I hope that a footfall counter will also provide data for that report at the end of the year from the Infrastructure Minister. And as such, I'll be supporting this proposition as it stands. But I can understand people's reservations. I really can. And I can understand why St Helier deputies, who might be the ones who you would expect to support this proposition, have those reservations, particularly when those very deputies have constantly been told by ministers, including the Infrastructure Minister, oh no, we can't do your proposition because it doesn't fit into our wider plan. It's not part of that wider plan. You can't, ministers, you cannot use that argument anymore because you're asking us to discard that argument now. And so with that, I say I will be supporting this proposition, but there are many caveats, and I will do my best to see if we can get a footfall counter in Broad Street to help us determine whether the trial is successful or not. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If no other member wishes to speak, Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I'm speaking because I know Deputy Ash will miss it if I don't. So a couple of things I just want to go through because this is the final proposition and it is very important that we know what we're doing here. Just go through it briefly and make some suggestions. Part A, to maintain the current pedestrian priority for the remainder of 2021, and then it is a trial. I can understand that. I can see where we are, and as long as it is a trial and there's a review. Part B is very interesting, to work with the parish of St Helier and other interested parties to facilitate and enable initiatives and enhance appeal and the vibrancy of the pedestrian priority area subject to public health restrictions, etc., etc. So what I would like to say to the Connotab is I think one of the things that would attract people is to have music in that area, live music. And I'm very, very concerned about what is effectively the death of live music in pubs and in public venues. And I believe it is in part due to the licensing system for live music. And so when we look at these sort of areas and we're trying to build them into wider areas, perhaps we should be looking at those types of systems. How do you enable live music in pubs and bars and in public spaces, which does attract people particularly as we move out of COVID. And let's be honest, we could all do with a bit of live music at the end of COVID. It's good for the soul. So I would say that when you're looking at these sorts of improvements, don't just think about street furniture or pieces of grass, but look wider at what type of things attract people into a town and make it vibrant and an exciting place to be. And to be honest, if you have less people living there late at night and more businesses, then the opportunity to have music without disturbing the local who live there is an opportunity one could be taking. And I think that's one of the things that we should be doing. I am concerned about the word review. We've heard it. I mean, I don't know if I had a penny, sir, for every time I heard the review, I'd have, I don't know, 326 pennies. I don't know how many, but I'd have quite a few. Not enough to have a down payment on anything, but there you go. But it's the outcome, and I think I understand the sort of catch-22 situation regards data. You've got to do the review to get the data. If you have the data, if you don't do the review, you got to have the data before you change anything. But we've got to look at what we're looking for, and I'm still in my mind, and I would like the CONOTAB to address the issue of what will you be looking for in this review? Is it footfall? Is it air pollution levels? Is it the number of cars? Well, obviously there'll be less cars because it's closed to cars. Is it the use of buses? Is it some sort of qualitative survey of people in town asking whether they think there's a improvement to the atmosphere, etc., etc.? What is it that's going to prove later on in the year that we keep this going, or more importantly, that you stop it and you reverse it? Because a review is no good if you haven't got an outcome that goes both ways. Cycling access Broad Street, I want to reiterate, and I'm going to say it again, about the education in the use of shared spaces needs to happen. And, you know, we are not taking that far enough on the island, because I don't think we are actually serious about the creation of proper shared spaces and the benefits of them. And that is a massive missed opportunity. We should be doing it now. And I want to say, obviously, a bus service is a very important thing. We've talked about a hopper. I would like, if possible, I think it would be kind, given the amount of time I spent talking about buses, if I could be the first person on the hopper. Even perhaps, and I know the CONOTAB likes to do this, but perhaps I could cut the ribbon on the hopper. As a sort of benefit, I could ask the Chief Minister if he'll come with me. We'll have a bus ride together and enjoy ourselves. It might be a really good idea. And with that, sir, I think well, let's give it a go. We've got rid of the amendments, which seem to me to be nonsensical. We've got an amendment that is got some action, but I do need to be convinced that something is actually going to change by the end of this review, and I want to see what the review is coming up with. So if the CONOTAB can address those issues, then sir, I would support him. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. Yes, if we're going to have an overall review of traffic, then perhaps there are one or two excuse me, areas we should pay attention to. Our tourists and the locals like a shopping experience with shops which are not the same as Watford, Wilmslow or any other suburb. Some of our members are probably too young to remember super shops like Marcel Jacques, Finesse, Peter Baker and so on. And I also remember King Street, Queen Street as carrying traffic, and you could park on King Street. Cars were a lot smaller then. Can we do something when Deputy Ward talks about the shared spaces? I think one of the big education areas for that is cyclists. How many times have we been nearly run over by cyclists, or we've been stuck behind a score of cyclists in semi-transparent lycra panting up Montlevaux? Why don't they use the railway walk? Isn't it time to consider licensing cycles for adults? And another thing to look at, when we get tourists coming into town, if they're coming from France, for instance, what routes do they take? I mean, when when I had my shop, they used to come in from the harbour. They used to then go to the tourist office to pick up maps and so on. Then they'd go to British Home Stores and buy a suitcase. And they'd go round, go to the market, go to the butchers, and they'd come to us on the way back to the shop, so that, you know, you'd have the suitcase open on the table in the shop, and they were sort of tucking their kilts and their tartans and their woolen jumpers in with the leg of lamb and the leg of beef. So, you know, the routes they take are really quite important, because then you can see where the main shopping areas are and so on. You know, there's quite a lot of science when you're, as Deputy Morell has been saying, a lot of science when you're busy looking at shopping, and particularly in a tourist town. So, you know, perhaps we can be a little more scientific about it, rather than, you know, you need to consult some women about shopping. So perhaps that could be taken into account. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy Tadier.
So I was prompted to speak by the previous speaker. We really do, some members really do have to stop this cyclist bashing. The senator asked rhetorically, perhaps, how many times have we almost been killed by cyclists? Well, for my part, it's never. I've never almost been killed by a cyclist, but I probably have almost been killed by a car on several occasions. Maybe in some of those occasions it could have been my fault when I was younger, but in other occasions it was probably, you know, for a split second, if the car had come a bit closer. I'd say cars are the issues, not bicycles. And the reason that bicycles go up Mont Leveau on the road rather than on the railway walk, apart from the fact that the railway walk may not take them to the exact destination they wish to, is that a lot of these bikes have very thin tyres, even some of the road bikes. And if you go on a gravel track, and I've experienced it myself, you can very easily get a puncture just from ordinary cycling on a track. And why would a cyclist, whose perhaps main method of, or only method of transportation, apart from Shank's pony, is to get around on their bike, take the risk of having a puncture on the way to work? I don't think it's reasonable. And so whilst we're not debating cycling, it does seem germane to the general argument about sustainable transport that we have to get away from these arguments of cycling bashing, because cyclists aren't the problem. I suspect that one of the reasons psychologically cyclists make some people, or some of us, feel uncomfortable is because they make us feel guilty. And I feel guilty, perhaps even at an unconscious or subconscious level, when I'm driving in my car, knowing that perhaps I don't always need to drive it and I should be on my bicycle as well. And the reality is that bicycles don't slow us down in the grand scheme of things, because if they weren't on bikes, they'd be on cars. There'd be more cars on the road and more traffic to sit in, and that essentially we tend to get to the destination pretty much at exactly the same time that we would, irrespective of whether there was a cyclist in front of us. And that applies whether you're on Grand Vaux, Beaumont Hill, or coming through town, I would suggest. So we actually need to start being grateful for people who have decided to ditch their cars. And as a government and as an assembly, I think we're all supposed to be behind sustainable transport. So I will say that. And I think that when it comes to Broad Street, I think it's been said already, it probably will benefit from pedestrianisation or partial pedestrianisation at some point, and the whole of town now needs to be looked at holistically. And I know that there's a new town centre manager, I think, has been appointed, recently, or certainly a new member of staff in that area who will no doubt have exciting new ideas about what can be done. And I think that person needs to work with the relevant ministers, the constable, and anybody else who's got an interest in transforming St Helier into what it could be from perhaps what it currently is. So I'll leave the comments there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputies, any other member wish to speak on the main proposition? No other member wishes to speak? Senator Farnham.
Thank you. So I just wanted to very quickly talk about the importance of making progress, albeit as some members has described it in a piecemeal way. I don't really think it is in a piecemeal way, because the whole rejuvenation of the town centre, going back to the original pedestrianisation of King Street and Queen Street, has been done in stages. I'm really looking forward to making more progress and looking at rejuvenation of much more of St Helier, especially moving into up towards West Centre and up towards the north of town. Again, there's huge opportunity to do that. But of course, if we try and wait for a grand master plan that addresses all of these issues, as we all know, perfect is the enemy of a perfect plan, is the enemy of a good plan. We will, as we've seen on a number of other occasions, Fort Regent, for example, be talking about this for years to come, while nothing actually changes. I am disappointed that we might end up with buses at 15-minute intervals moving along Broad Street, but hopefully, and I know the infrastructure minister is prepared to look at sensible solutions. I hope we can find a compromise, because pedestrianisation is exactly that. If we made those allowances for King Street and Queen Street, we wouldn't have enjoyed the economic benefits from the pedestrianisation and the value that's given to that part of St Helier. So I'm fully supportive of this. This is a small piece of a much bigger puzzle that we must continue to build in the years ahead, and I hope members will support it and do whatever we can to ensure that town has a vibrant and successful economic future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak on the proposition. Then I close the debate and call upon the Connétable to respond.
Thank you, sir. It's been a long debate, and I don't propose to go back over everything that people have said. I hope you'll forgive me, sir, if I start off with a nod to Monty Python and the Holy Grail by saying town centre experience, town centre experience, town centre experience, because it amuses me to think of Deputy Ash covering his ears at that point as I torture him with that phrase. But town centre experience really is at the heart of this proposition, and it is, to pick up on Deputy Morell's phrase, it is the empirical evidence that most members will have seen in the past week or so, courtesy of the Association of Jersey Architects, Parish of St Helier, Parks Department, and indeed the new town centre manager, assisted of course by the Jersey Old Motor Car Club with their fantastic vintage vehicles that have been on display. That is the town centre experience that has been attracting more people to Broad Street in the run-up to Liberation. And I'm very grateful to everyone who was involved. I must say I was fairly mystified by the position of the Reform Party during this debate. I had assumed that they would be fully supportive of this small but difficult and clearly concrete step towards a better town centre experience. I apologise again to Deputy Ash for that slipping in. The Reform Party, after all, have signed up to this kind of improvement to town, which is essential quid pro quo of asking more people to live in town. It's to allow more space in the town for people to move around and socialise and so on. I was encouraged by what appeared to be a shift in Deputy Ward's position, and I think I do understand his frustration, because I, like him, have waited years for strategies, particularly with regard to walking and cycling, which have been promised by successive ministers and which have never come forward. And we are currently waiting for a cycling strategy, a walking strategy, a parking strategy, and a bus strategy. We haven't seen any of them yet, and so I do understand and to some extent share his frustration. And I'm glad that he moved towards the end of the debate to a position where he feels he can support this. I do take issue with Deputy Southern. This is not greenwash. Greenwash is signing up to the words of environmental concern, but when the chips are down, not voting for a concrete improvement that would deliver green improvements. And I would challenge any member of Reform who wishes to still vote against this proposition to meet members, for example, of Cycle for Jersey in then the crowded and polluted Broad Street, and try to tell them that they were doing more for their green credentials by opposing P28 than by giving it their support. We've had a number of members giving various reasons why they object to this. We've had really a huge variety of them, even some St Helier deputies saying that they were concerned it might affect the improvements they were trying to get in their own district. That is really depressing, and Deputy Gardner was quite right. The parish holds a meeting for the deputies every month. We've done it for years. Propositions such as this are tabled, and members can and sometimes do provide feedback, and in Deputy Gardner's case, constructive amendments. Indeed, 36 hours ago, I emailed the town deputies, all 10 of them, to say that I was thinking of accepting the minister's amendment to allow buses through Broad Street, and I would welcome their feedback. I think I had feedback from 4 of the members, but not from any of the members who've spoken against the proposition today. And again, that's disappointing when, as a parish, we try to do so much to include the deputies in our decision making. A small point of correction for Reform Party members who referred on a couple of occasions to the town council. We don't have a town council in St Helier. We have had a shadow council that has met and is developing proposals, which I'm sure will feature part of, which will feature in any candidate's manifesto next year. But we do not yet have a town council. They are quite right, though. If we did have a town council, and I absolutely support its creation, this kind of thing would not need to come to the island's parliament. It would be sorted out by the council with a discussion with the ministers. So I think that they're right in that on that score. I wanted to address, and I'm about to wind up, sir, the question of what happens next. If we vote down P28, I ask states members, why do they think in the 20 or so years since this matter was proposed that it's never actually happened? It's never been brought forward by any department or any individual member. And the answer, of course, is because it's difficult, it's divisive, it's unpopular, and it always will be. And it was only because of the pandemic that we were given the opportunity to see what can be achieved. And members who vote against it because they want more details, they want to see the bigger plan, they want to get more data, they want to talk to all the traders and so on. Are they the members who are going to bring this back to a future assembly? Are they putting their hand up to say they will bring back the closure of Broad Street? I don't think they will. And so, sir, I want to just mention a couple of specific questions. Deputy Ward, in his closing speech, did ask what the review would amount to, and I must confess, so I only put the word review in my proposition because what I actually wanted was some action. I wanted this trial to take place, but I thought, well, I better put the review in because people will expect us to monitor and publish the results. So of course, Deputy Ward actually mentioned everything that should be in the review. And indeed, I'm grateful to Deputy Morell for offering to try and get another footfall camera. I don't think he may know this, but there used to be 3 footfall cameras in St Helier, one paid for, as has always been the case, by the parishioners, one paid for by the Chamber of Commerce, and one paid for by the Economic Development Department. And sadly, it's only the parish's footfall camera that has been kept running because for various reasons the other 2 were switched off. So I would welcome the provision of another footfall camera to actually give us some data to monitor and measure how footfall increases in the coming months. Clearly, it'll be a complicated picture because it won't simply be down to the state of Broad Street any more than we can blame the closure of Broad Street for poor sales in those shops. I would also like just to return briefly to Deputy Ash, because apart from his enticing remark about not saying the phrase town centre experience too much, I've just done it again, he did give an analysis of the town centre's problems, which I thought was completely misguided. Interestingly, he referred to Baygowns remaining empty for so long, and I've recently had some very exciting meetings with the owner of Baygowns, who's subject to planning, is hoping to turn it into a new restaurant right in the town centre with al fresco both on Broad Street and on the main precinct. And that's, I think, an example of the tremendous resilience of Jersey's town centre. Even as we go through a pandemic, entrepreneurs and local developers are planning how they can make town work. But so I want to conclude by mentioning what was the most surprising intervention. It almost made me fall out of my chair. And it was from a member that I think I've rather unkindly in the past called a climate change denier. Senator Ferguson gave us a very real, practical and honest example of why it is better to run a shop in a street which has less traffic and isn't just used as a through route by people trying to get through town quickly. And I'm very grateful to Senator Ferguson's support, and I hope this may be the beginning of Senator Ferguson becoming fully signed up to all of the actions that are going to come out of our response as an island to the climate change emergency. I thank members for their contributions and maintain the proposition as amended. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Conor Tarr. I ask the greffier to place a vote into the chat. And I open the voting and ask members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted. 38 votes pour, 4 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 3 votes pour in the chat.
Could we have the floor, sir? Please?
The 4, yes.
Those voting contre, the Deputy of St John, Deputy Truscott, Deputy Higgins, and Deputy Ash.
Very well. The next item of public business is the Jersey Police Complaints Authority appointment of members, P29, lodged by the Minister for Home Affairs. The main responder for the purposes of this debate is the Chair of the Children Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The states are asked to decide whether they're of opinion, in accordance with Article 2 of and the Schedule 2, the Police Complaints and Discipline Jersey Law 1999, to appoint the following persons as members of the Jersey Police Complaints Authority for a period of 3 years, commencing immediately. Mr. Mark James, Mr. Patrick Abernethy.
Deputy Guida, you are acting as rapporteur.
Indeed, sir.
Very well. Deputy Guida.
Sir, I am very pleased to recommend the appointment of Mr. Mark James and Mr. Patrick Abernethy as members of the Jersey Police Complaints Authority following a competitive recruitment process. Their biographies are summarized in the report, and they are both very impressive candidates. Members of the Police Complaints Authority serve on a voluntary basis, and we are very grateful to them for offering their time and their considerable experience to perform this important role. I make the proposition, sir.
Proposition seconded.
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? No member wishes to speak on the proposition? Then I close the debate and ask the greffier to put a vote into the chat. Open the voting and ask members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, and I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted, 35 votes pour, no votes contra, no abstentions in the link, and a further 2 votes pour noted in the chat. The next and indeed final item of public business is the regulation of zero-hour contracts, P32, lodged by Deputy Southern. For the purpose of the debate, the main responder will be the Minister for Social Security. There is an amendment lodged by that Minister. Deputy Southern, am I right in my understanding that you accept the amendment?
Sir, I'm absolutely delighted to accept every element, every word of the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that clarity. And are members happy, therefore, that we take the proposition as amended? Anyone indicate as a contrary view? Could they do so now? I will take that as approval on a standing vote, and I therefore ask the greffier to read the proposition as amended.
The states are asked to decide whether they're of opinion, A, further to the commitment made in the 2020-2023 government plan, to agree that a review of existing legislation should be undertaken to ensure that sufficient measures are available to protect employees from any challenges caused by the use of zero-hour contracts, and as needed to strengthen the regulation of employment, such review to include the need to introduce 1, a definition of zero-hour employment contracts, 2, the prevention of employers requiring zero-hour workers to always be available for work, 3, a ban on exclusivity clauses, 4, a right for 0-hour workers who in practice work regular hours to switch to a contract which reflects the normal hours worked. 5, a right to reasonable notice of work schedule. 6, a right to compensation for shift cancellation or curtailment without reasonable notice. 7, other measures to be identified as part of the review. B, to request the Minister for Social Security to bring forward for debate any necessary legislation and any such enforcement regulations as may be required for the implementation of the matters described in paragraph A by the end of 2022. C, to request the Minister for Social Security to bring forward for debate legislation to implement a ban on exclusivity clauses by March 2022, and to request the Council of Ministers to allocate additional financial and law drafting resources during 2021 to the Minister for Social Security to enable this work to be completed. D, to request the Council of Ministers to allocate additional funding in the 2022-2026 government plan in respect of the cost of expert advice to support the actions specified under A and B, and to provide a publicity campaign to advise employers and employees of workers' rights under 0-hours contracts and any changes following the actions specified under A, B and C.
Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. I'm not muted, right, lovely. Why am I bringing this proposition today? And quite frankly, I tell you, what piqued my interest in this, in reviving doing something about 0-hours contracts since I last looked at it some 8 years ago, was the Supreme Court, the UK Supreme Court ruling last month, a month ago or thereabouts, that Uber drivers were not self-employed but workers, and it illustrated for me just what the gig economy rules were operating and what they're doing, and effectively the model for Uber drivers is just a way of reducing the employer's costs by passing on the cost of national insurance contributions to their workers by calling them self-employed. And now we don't have that issue, I don't think, in the island, but it just made me think about what was happening and want to do something about it. Now, the first thing to say is, what are 0-hours contracts? Some of the definitions used. 0-hours contracts are used by employers, this comes from Jacks, used by employers whereby workers have no guaranteed hours and agree to be potentially available for work. They are used by companies seeking labour flexibility and by workers seeking flexibility around their other commitments. The Jersey Advisory Conciliation Service, in its guide to zero contracts, draws attention to the absence of any clear definition of what constitutes 0-hour contracts, legal definition. They say 0-hour contracts are arrangements where people agree to be available for work as and when required, but that no particular number of hours or regular times of work are specified. If the states accept that there are indeed issues associated with certain uses or abuses of ZHC's 0-hours contracts, and to agree to regulation, then the first thing we need, obviously, is a clear legal definition. And that's what I've outlined in paragraph A1 of this proposition. So first thing, we need a clear legal definition so we know what we're working with. Secondly, you might ask, why is this proposition talking about regulation but not an outright ban? And that's not an outright ban. As such, I accept that there are entirely appropriate needs where there's genuine requirement for a flexible workforce to be temporarily available. Examples are several, but teaching staff on a supply list, nurses registered on the bank to cover staff absence, waiting staff needed to cater for a large banquet, seasonal pickers of certain crops. So it's not about banning the use of these contracts, it's about their regulation and controlling how we use them. And what we've seen is that in the last few years prior to COVID, both the UK government and ourselves have taken a pride in our ability to create jobs. But it has been recognised that many of these jobs have been low quality, low paid work. Employment conditions have worsened in what has been labelled the gig economy. And the problems with zero-hour contracts are several. But for example, income insecurity of variable hours makes it difficult to manage finances or to access credit. You can't borrow on the back of a 0 hours job. And variable hours makes it very difficult to plan anything. If your hours 1 week are 40 hours, and then the third week 20 hours, and maybe the week after that 10 hours because the boss doesn't need you, then that's very difficult to manage, and you're likely to end up missing some rent, owing people, borrowing to get by, and it's very difficult to coordinate that with income support, for example. You then got unpredictability. You get last-minute shift changes, make it difficult to cater for family needs. So particularly for women, that's the way things work. Sudden changes in your rota can cause difficulties. And then thirdly, the problem it arises, an inability to assert your rights. To put it at its simplest, if you're on a 0 hours contract, you could be sacked tomorrow, or you could think that you could be sacked tomorrow. So you don't argue with the boss at the risk that next week you'll have no hours, quite frankly. And I've heard of employers just threatening that straightforwardly. Yeah, if you want to be working next week, do these shifts. Where there is a genuine call for flexibility, then the variation in hours leads to financial insecurity. And that's reflected in this comment, I use it, from the TUC. The TUC believes the rise of involuntary and casual temporary work, along with increases in 0 hours contracts, show that beneath the headline employment figures lies an increasingly insecure, vulnerable workforce. Too many workers are not working enough hours to get by, or have no guarantee of paid work from 1 week to the next. That outline and that definition is what we see around us today. There are many people come to me who say, I can't avoid 0 hours contracts because everything I see is a 0 hours contract. That's all that's on offer, and that's all you can get. And that the combination leads to what's called one-way benefits. In Jersey, for example, a series of tribunal judgments now make it clear that employment rights are protected no matter what hours are worked. But this has little significance if the workers are unaware of their protection. If the worker believes their employer could cut their hours to 0 next week with little or no notice, this can produce massive insecurity. This leads to what Matthew Taylor in his UK report in 2017, Good Work, refers to as one-way flexibility. So the mantra always produced is it's a flexible way of working. It works for the employer and the employee. Matthew Taylor in his report says, we have heard repeatedly during the review that there is an issue of flexibility not being reciprocated, with a requirement to be available for work at very short notice without any guarantee that work will actually be available. And he went on to say, whilst in theory, individuals in these working arrangements have the right to turn down work, we were told that workers needing work, but unaware of the unfair dismissal rights, often felt that to express legitimate views about conditions or make even reasonable requests risked having their future work denied them. And the problem here is that it's an individual challenge. So individuals think they're not getting a fair deal. They make a complaint, and they thereby take on a fight with their employer. If their employer has the power not to use them next week, full stop, you're out of work, then you don't challenge. And what's happened is, whereas there has been
has been some advertising and publicity about workers' rights. That's been very ineffective. They haven't picked up on it. And whilst it's only individuals who can challenge and there's no enforcement taking place, then it's very slow for the understanding and of their rights to be generated. So that's the reason why I brought it. And the reason why I've accepted the amendment is equally obvious. They're saying here, right, further to commitment made in 2020-23 government plan to agree that a review of existing legislation should be undertaken to ensure that sufficient measures are available to protect employers from any challenges caused by the use of zero-hour contracts as needed to strengthen the regulation of employment, such a review to include the need to introduce. So what the minister's done is agreed with me we must do something and asked for a review of what we've got at the moment. That, to my mind, is perfectly acceptable. Then goes on, the review would need to include the need for 1, a definition of zero-hour employment contracts, 2, the prevention of employers requiring zero-hour workers to be always available for work. That one is vital, I think. If you are chained, if you like, to be making yourself available on the fear that you're going to get 0 hours next week, then that obviously is a restriction in your rights. A ban on exclusivity clauses, again, this is something that we've already passed actually, and I'm glad that I put it in on the chance that we might do something about it. I'm glad that the minister has picked up on this and said that actually I'd like a debate around exclusivity clauses if possible, because we've already passed this, and let's see if now we want to do something about it to ban this particular aspect. And I think the minister is absolutely right. A right for zero-hour workers who in practice work regular hours to switch to a contract which reflects the normal hours worked. Now, this is one of the ways in which the 0 hours contracts are abused, basically. You're told you're on 0 hours, you work, let's say, for 6 months, during which time you've done 40 hours a week. Why shouldn't you go to your boss and say, I want a proper full-time contract, I'm doing 40 hours a week, with which would involve, for example, in some cases, receiving sick pay, in some cases not having your holiday pay rolled up so you can actually take a holiday, or signing up for the or being included in the pension scheme run by the company, whatever. All sorts of ways. If you're on a 0 hours contracts, you don't get all the benefits, and this says you should have the right to a contract which reflects the normal hours work. That could be 40 hours a week, or it could be 25 hours a week, but let's have something solid that people can depend on and not fall into poverty. A right to a reasonable notice of work schedule. And when I was doing 0 hours contracts at the shelter, we tended to get a week's notice, a week's rota published, which you then agree a week at a time, and that was a very useful way of doing things. But occasionally you'd get a sudden call in the middle of the afternoon, can you come in tonight? That also in certain circumstances would be acceptable. This depends upon the job, but negotiating with your workers, between worker and employer, as to what's reasonable, and where that reasonable notice is not identified, then and not reasonable,
then there should be some compensation. And they then say, set item 7, other measures to be identified as part of the review. So if we get this review, then, and there's things we haven't covered, then that should be seen in that phrase. So yeah. They then go on to say, bring forward for debate legislation to implement ban on exclusivity clauses by March 2022, and to request the Council of Ministers to allocate financial and law drafting resources during 2021 so that the Minister for Social Security could enable this work to be completed. So this looks like a different timescale to produce item C on exclusivity clauses, and it looks very positive that the Minister is happy to work on this earlier than the rest in order to enable work to be completed. Finally, to request the Council of Ministers to allocate additional funding to the 2022-26 government plan in respect of the cost of expert advice to support the actions identified under A and B, and to provide a publicity campaign to advise employers and employees of workers' rights under 0 hours contracts and any changes following the actions specified under A, B and C. So that's a fairly comprehensive plan to actually make progress on this particular issue, and I'm glad, I'm grateful for the Minister this time round to say we're happy to take on this work and see where we get to in the timescale that I think is acceptable and that they should be able to meet. And what they say in the end is members are asked to support parts A, B and D. Part C, they say, is included to allow members to make a separate decision on the early implementation of an exclusivity clause. So that piece of work can be done first, to show, if you like, show willing. And the Minister is asking us, and I am asking us, and I support it wholeheartedly, to support parts A, B and D. And I'm quite happy to take A, B and D separately to C and have a separate vote on that to see if we want to get a move on exclusivity clauses. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes.
Deputy Martin.
Thank you, sir, and pleasure to follow Deputy Sutherland. He's practically taken my speech out of my out of my head, sir.
We're in total agreement.
Yes, and Deputy Sutherland, I know we don't always agree, sir, but me and Deputy Sutherland worked on the actual very first draft of the employment law 2003-4 before it was ever introduced. So it's glad to see that we've come back to some sort of agreement. And as I say, to be helpful, especially Part A, Part 7, Roman 7, like other measures to be identified as part of the review. Obviously, I want to get an expert in employment law and what things might be thrown up. Don't forget, we've just gone through a pandemic. People are working from home. What an absolute really good time to have a good root and branch at everything that we do. The Deputy is totally right on C. It was identified to me when we were discussing this at Council of Ministers that by Deputy Renouf, because Deputy Renouf was on the scrutiny panel then, that this had already been agreed by the Assembly. So I just need a bit of a oomph from the Assembly today to bring that forward with, as I say, a bit of law drafting time and a bit of money, and we can do that. And D, sir, which again we have added in, will give me money to help publicise, because we really had a brilliant States members briefing on Friday, and I'm not going to get into the the rights and wrongs of people do not know their rights, and I'm certainly not going to talk about the UK law. Most workers on 0 hours on all contracts have quite a few rights from day one. They do have the right to ask for the change of contract, but it's about knowing your rights. So that's what D does. It's one of those, sir. I'm glad we've got to this point. I haven't changed anything in Deputy Sutherland's A 1 to 6. Well, at Part A I've changed because of the timing. It was something we were going to do anyway. I've got so much work on employment issues and reviews. Family friendly review needs to be done again. Well, when it's been done again, and there's other work we're doing. So I don't really want to prolong it. I'm so pleased the Deputy has accepted the amendment, and that we can get on and do this work, and we've got the support, and it's something that we can work on together, or work forward together. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy Morrell.
Thank you, sir, and thank the previous two speakers for their thoughts. I'm speaking primarily because I agree with, and I will be supporting the proposition, and I think Deputy Sutherland's absolutely right to focus on this in certain areas, and I'm particularly pleased with the work, to seek to prohibit exclusivity clauses, which to me are just anathema to 0 hours contracts. But I wanted to speak because 0 hours contracts are one of those topics which are very easily condemned without people looking at the other side of the argument. And in this case, I do not deny there is abuse of 0 hours contracts. An exclusivity clause, if anyone has that in their contract as a 0 hours contract, to me that's an abuse of a 0 hours contract straight away. But I also know that they are an excellent way for some people to work, and I speak from the experience of my family, particularly my wife. Please forgive me again for I ask her forgiveness for speaking about her business experience in this assembly again, but she ran a business, or runs a business, and certainly when she started out, she really wanted, the way her business worked, which is a training business, really was an excellent opportunity for, in the main, mothers who wanted to get back into the workplace, and in these cases skilled mothers, because they all had to be trainers and teachers, to get back into the workplace, but who, because of the fact that they were mothers of young children, were unable to commit to full-time or even part-time work. The rigidity of the hours did not work for them. And so, yet these were obviously highly skilled people who wanted to work. Had they not had the option of 0 hours contracts, they wouldn't have been able to work. That was clear. And it was just through that business, I was able to see why 0 hours contracts are not all bad. And in fact, in some cases, they were extremely good. In this case, we're talking about a part of society, new mothers who in the past have found it really hard to get back into work and have often found themselves excluded for work. Something which, given children are around for approximately 20 years or so, is something they could be excluded for work for 20 years, then find it extremely hard to get back into the workplace. Thus, we had a system which meant that it was hugely weighted in favour of men in the workplace. I mean, it's still like that. It's not past tense. It is still like that. But 0 hours contracts enabled this group of people, this particular demographic, to work. And I think it's really important just to highlight that. And that's why I'm pleased that this is about a review. And I really hope the review is open and genuinely looks at the problem or not the problem, genuinely looks at the subject in the round. I also wanted to say I think it's really important to put this into context. According to the latest Jersey Labour report for December 2020, 10% of workers in Jersey, that's about 6,000 people, are on 0 hours contracts. 90% of all workers in Jersey are on either full-time or part-time contracts. So we know that this is a problem, not a problem. I don't mean to keep saying that. I'm tripping myself up and speaking against my own proposition by saying that. But we know that this is an issue which affects the vast minority of workers in Jersey's economy. I think that's really important because, again, if we were if this was a tool of rampant abuse by employers, I would expect many more than 10% of workers to be on 0 hours contracts, because employers would be trying to use it as a tool to exploit workers. The fact that it's only 10%, I think, shows that employers, overall 90% of all employees are on full and part-time contracts. That means they are not being exploited. And it's those 10% that we need to make sure that those 10% are not exploited in any way at all. But again, I just want to make sure that people don't have this idea that employers in Jersey are running away exploiting all their workers. They're absolutely not from that perspective. I also just want to reiterate that both Deputy Sullivan and Deputy Martin have said it. Just ran away from me there. I can't remember, but they said it. It doesn't matter. And so it's just those things. Please support this proposition, but I ask the people undertaking the review, do not come at it from the perspective of 0 hours contracts are all bad. They are not. They can enable people to get into the workplace who would not otherwise be in the workplace. The important thing here is to make sure there's no abuse. And I really hope this review does that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to speak briefly because I'm delighted to see this proposition and congratulate both the Minister for embracing it with the amendment and for Deputy Sullivan for persisting, because this has been a very long-standing issue and this work is well overdue. I think I do understand Deputy Morell saying that, well, it is a minority and a minority on 0 hours contracts. But there is no question there is abuse. And I'm certainly aware, and I'm going to mention this in a little bit, but not disclose enough, that I believe the abuse is still taking place within the state's machinery. And as employers, we must set an example. For example, I think that the issue arises where the 0 hours arrangement, which is intended to provide flexibility for groups of people who wish to work in that way occasionally or flexibly in that way, and where the employer has that need to provide an arrangement for doing so, and I absolutely accept that. But there are situations, and the information I have, it's still the case, that where people are working regular normal work on a daily basis on fixed hours under a fixed workplace, and having to make sure they fit in with the annual rotas of annual leave and so on. And those people I know are in a situation where they don't get paid. They don't get paid holidays at all. They don't get paid for bank holidays either. They do not have the regular they do not have pension benefits. And they do not have the opportunity for sickness pay. And all those things I think are frankly unacceptable. They're still going on. And I'm really hoping that this review will stop that. And I think some of that arises in this particular case I'm going to mention the department, but I'm not enough to be able to identify it, and I'm happy to talk to the Health Minister privately after the sex, because this is our Department of Health, where secretarial staff have been, and to my knowledge 7 or 8 years ago, my direct knowledge goes back that long, there's a team of people that are in this situation where the rules of the very sensible clinical nurse bank are being applied to that group. And my information is that's still occurring. And I think that's not acceptable. And so please, I ask, we as a state need to set an example. I believe that those issues in that case breach anyway the employment law. But of course, people who need work are not going to take up challenges through the employment system, tribunal system easily. And so they're generally not unionised or not represented in any way. And I think this kind of undergroup of people, underclass of people, I think is frankly is long since been far too long as far as I'm concerned. So I'm absolutely delighted, but I am not saying that there is never any benefit for having these flexible arrangements. But when we're in a situation where managerially within the Estates Department, they're being abused. This is not unacceptable. This is not acceptable, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colin Taliesin.
Thank you, sir. Firstly, I wanted to speak to respond directly to the Deputy about the issues that he raised about States employees. And I can assure him that we have, in the past 12 months, conducted a review of all 0 hours contracts to ensure that they are being properly applied and that they are people who are on 0 hours contracts are temporary employees who are not working a regular pattern of work. So I'm sure, as he knows, Jersey currently employment legislation says that if you are on a regular pattern of work and you're doing a certain number of hours each week, then you are not a 0 hours contractor and you're a full-time employee, and you're either entitled to a part-time or full-time contract. And we have found a number of issues which have been resolved, and that review continues. The other point that I just want to make briefly was about exclusivity clauses. And whilst I completely accept that they are important and need to be looked at, I would just ask when the review is done that a degree of care is taken when looking at 0 hours contracts in the use in the finance industry, where imposing an non-exclusivity clause could actually jeopardize that position, because clearly if you're working for a bank and you're doing part-time compliance work, then the bank is going to be unhappy about you going to work for another bank to do the same thing. So some care needs to be thought about how you would resolve that situation to ensure that the role would exist. Otherwise, we could find a number of roles eliminated. I'm not saying I particularly approve of banks employing compliance staff or other staff on temporary contracts at the 0 hours, but nevertheless, there are situations where it's appropriate, where a review is pending and the bank needs to pull in staff to help it resolve some of its compliance issues. So I'm not saying that we should ban those. I'm just saying that I'm just asking that the review looks at it carefully to ensure that some roles are able to continue and that any exclusivity or non-exclusivity clauses are applied with care in some sectors. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. And I would, having looked through the proposition and the amendments, I don't see reference to consultation with local industry. And whilst we have several large employers and of course our own governments, there are myriads of small employers who will rely heavily on 0 hours contracts. Notwithstanding that, I wouldn't argue that they shouldn't be under the proper arrangements, but I would ask that in the review we do reach out and get proper feedback from smaller employers. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Colin Tubbs. Any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Southern to respond.
There we go, I'm muted. Thank you, sir. And at the end of a long day, what a pleasure it is to get to 2 minutes past 5 with, I believe, what is going to, I'm confident it's something under my belt. And I thank all those who have contributed, particularly, and the Minister, particularly the Minister, for agreeing with me that time had come now to do something about this egregious abuse in some cases of 0 hours contracts, and the fact that many of our often poorer workers, less well-off workers, are not clear on what rights they have and daren't challenge what's happening to them in terms of their employment. And Deputy Morell talked about yes, what I would call a large minority. 10%, I believe, is higher at a higher rate of use of 0 hours contracts than occurs on the mainland. So whilst he was saying, well, he focused on the 10% and saying that was a minority, I think that is a significant and large minority who should be, and he agreed, should be protected. Interesting to hear Deputy Young with understanding and knowledge of people being exploited through exactly this. It sounds like exactly
this sort of exploitation, doing standard hours, but no paid holidays, no bank holidays, no pension and no sickness, because they're deemed to be on 0 hours contracts. And that's exactly the case. That's exactly the case that we want to get hold of and to suppress. That should not be happening. It should not be happening, especially in one of our departments. We should be leading the way in terms of our employment good practice. And as he said, that's a wonderful example. And what happens is these people don't complain. They're on a 0 hours contract. You wouldn't complain if you're on a 0 hours contract. You feel or you think you're going to be sacked tomorrow. So nothing changes. And unless we can do something to expand our enforcement, because we make it part of the law that employers pay the minimum wage, at least the minimum wage, and yet we don't say, and if you've got people on 0 hours contracts, are you sure that they should be on that 0 hours contracts? Let's inspect your books. Oh, look, these people are doing 40 hours a week regularly, and they have been doing that for the last 9 months. Why aren't they on a proper contract? And that's the sort of thing we need to be doing, just to expand a little on what would be good practice. Constable of St. One says we're on a hunt for effective use of 0 hours contracts, and the issue is still underway. It would be nice to have a session with the Deputy of St. One, examining what it actually is that they're looking at and what the prevalence is in the States departments of 0 hours contracts being misused. And the constable said, let's talk to small employers, and noticed that there wasn't any mention of small employers. No, there was, but there was 8 years ago and 5 years ago when we did some research on this and talked to lots of employers, including small employers, left, right and centre, and found that amongst their workers there was not a good knowledge of what their rights were, and many who were being, or several who were being exploited. So thanks to all the members for staying with this so far. I maintain the proposition and call for the appel, sir.
Thank you very much. Deputy, I ask the greffier to put a vote into the link.
Sir, I did ask that we could vote on RC. Sorry, I did ask the deputy. I think I understood why.
So which parts do you want to have taken separately then?
Can we put A, B and D together and C separate?
Yes, I don't see any reason why that can't happen. Very well. The first vote will be on paragraphs A, B and D. And I ask the greffier to put a vote into the link. Paragraphs A, B and D of the proposition. I open the voting and ask members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Ask the greffier to close the voting. Paragraphs A, B and D have been adopted. 38 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 2 votes pour in the chat. The next vote will be on paragraph C, and I ask the greffier to put a link as soon as she's able to do so in the chat. And I open the voting and ask members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the referee to close the voting. Paragraph C has been adopted. 34 votes pour, 2 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 1 vote pour noted in the chat.
Can we have the
Could we have the contra, please?
Those voting contra in the link, Deputy Lewis and the Connétable of Rouville.
Very well. That concludes public business for the Assembly, and I ask the Chair of PPC to propose the arrangements for public business for future meetings. Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. So there have been the following changes to the arrangement of public business since the consolidated order paper was published. P43 of 2021, allocation of the former States of Jersey Police Headquarters site to Rouge Boulogne School. This has been lodged today, and the proposition is listed for the next meeting on the 8th of June. And there is also P44 2021, Immigration Acts Consolidation and Extension to Jersey by order in Council, which has also been lodged today and has been listed for the 29th of June sitting. Looking at the amount of business for next time, the Assembly will definitely need Wednesday. There are some significant topics such as the housing affordability, rented dwellings regulations, and the States members' remuneration. So Thursday may also be needed as well. So with that change, Chair, I propose the arrangement of public business for future meetings.
Thank you very much, Chair. Any observations about the arrangements for future business? Otherwise, I shall assume it to be taken on a standing vote. If anyone wishes to a formal vote to be taken, could they please indicate either or in the chat? Very well. Then I take that as an agreement as to the arrangements for future public business proposed by the Chair of PPC on a standing vote. That concludes the business of the day and of the sitting, and the state stands adjourned until the 8th of June.